Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, we are going to be doing a quick tip tactica focusing on how you can handle the new Death Guard meta. And you better believe that Nurgle's finest are coming for the competitive scene. In recent weeks, I have seen the Death Guard numbers surging, not only in win rates, but also in player numbers. And just looking around my local meta, my God, there has been a lot of Plague Marines, a lot of Mortarions, and especially a lot of Deathshroud hitting the tables. And if you're not ready for them, they are truly a terrifying adversary. And so without further ado, let's find out how you can beat the Death Guard.
Attention guardsmen, the Commissariat has detected you have not yet liked this video. Do so immediately or else you will face the Emperor's wrath. And anyone who has not yet subscribed to the channel will be transferred to the penal battalions. That is all. Move out!
First things first, we need to understand what has been the catalyst for this emerging Death Guard meta. What has changed for that faction? Well, it comes down to a combination of two very important factors. Number one is many of the other top factions have received some heavy nerfs, and so now the Death Guard are basically saying, "Move, bitch, get out the way," as they push past the previous top dogs and go for the podium themselves. And secondly, not only did other factions get worse, but Death Guard actually got buffs as well, with points decreases on two of their best units. I don't know what the GW balance team was smoking when they decided that Mortarion needed to go down to 300 points. He was already very, very good, because not only is he a bit of a beast, but he's a massive, massive force multiplier. And then you take that force multiplier and you combine it with a points decrease on Deathshroud Terminators. I am convinced that that points decrease was a mistake. They gave it to the GW intern because Deathshroud Terminators were already the better of the two types of Terminator that Death Guard get. You've got the Blight Lord Terminators, which are often referred to as Shite Lord Terminators because they're so bad, and they didn't get a points decrease. And then you've got the Deathshroud, which I don't think I've not seen a Death Guard army which hasn't had at least 2 or 3 squads of these things in their army, and they got a decrease. So the big thing that you're seeing with the new Death Guard armies is Mortarion stuck in every single one, and a lot of Deathshroud Terminators. Those are the things you need to be ready for. There's still going to be a chance that you encounter some of the other Death Guard staples, such as the Plague Marines, but really it feels like Plague Marines are kind of out and Deathshroud spam is definitely in. So let's drill down into Deathshroud and into Mortarion to get a better understanding of what they can do. Because once we know what they're capable of, we can then start planning on how to beat them. Let's begin with the big dog himself, Mortarion. At his core, he is a demon primarch, so he is a force of death and destruction. But of course, being Nurgle, he's also a force of being an absolute brick shithouse. T12 combined with a 2+ armor save, 16 wounds, a 4+ invulnerable save, and a 5+ feel no pain make this chap unbelievably resilient. There's just a phenomenal amount of barriers before you are likely to get any damage on Mortarion. Take a las cannon, for example, one of the go-to anti-tank weapons of the game. Whether it's a las cannon or a storm shatter las cannon or a golden eagle las cannon or some other crazy ass las cannon variant, they all pretty much do the same thing. They're strength 12. Now that means you're wounding Mortarion on 4s. So even if you get the hit on him, you then have only a 50% chance of wounding him. If you wound him, he then has a 50% chance of just stopping that wound with his 4+ invulnerable save. And then, if he doesn't stop it, well, a third of the damage you're going to do is then going to be stopped because of his feel no pain. And let me tell you, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that will agree down in the comment section, rarely does a 5-up Feel No Pain feel like it's stopping a third of the damage. I can't tell you the number of times when either my 5-up Feel No Pain has spiked, like on my Death Core of Krieg, or when my opponent's 5-up Feel No Pain has spiked, but getting through a 5-up Feel No Pain can sometimes feel like the hardest part of any damage roll. On top of him being very durable, Mortarion is also surprisingly fast, considering he has a 10-inch movement. So if he wants to start flying forward and getting into combat, he can do that. The only saving grace is that in comparison to some other Primarchs and Demon Primarchs, his actual damage output is manageable. It's not low, don't get the wrong end of the stick here, guys. He's still a Demon Primarch, but it's not Magnus double doom bolting things off the table. The Lantern, which is like his pistol, is only strength 9. Sure, it's sustained hits D3 and it's flat damage 3, but generally I found the Lantern to be underwhelming. Rotwind is definitely where it's at because it can do devastating wounds, but even then, Mortarion's range damage is powerful but not overwhelming. In combat, he has either sweep or strike with his scythe. Sweep is 15 attacks at strength 7 AP -1 damage, so it will just carve through the majority of a Blobber Guardsman, but not the whole blob. So a full Blobber Guardsman can in theory tie him up, though of course he could Rotwind them down a bit first. And then his strike is strength 14 -3 4 damage, but he's only got 5 attacks with that. And I have actually seen Mortarion reliably not get through a Rogel Dawn, because inevitably he drops one hit or he drops one wound, and then at that point, if the Rogel Dawn, even if it fails all of its saves, won't lose all 18 of its wounds. And then you can also blank one of them. I mean, I've had Mortarion come in and barely take 8 wounds off a Rogel Dawn. Sometimes he's taken like 4 wounds off. So he is good, but his damage is not really the big thing about him. His durability is a big thing because you can't ignore him. But the main reason why Mortarion is so powerful is because of his abilities. And the big one here is the Lord of the Death Guard aura. While a friendly Death Guard unit is in 6 inches of this model, the unit can ignore any or all modifiers to its characteristic and to any roll or test made for it. This includes movement. As you'll see later on in this video, that's a very, very big deal. On top of this, he has the ability to pick each turn a buff to hand out to units around him, and the main one that people go for is Diseased Influence, which means that friendly Death Guard units within 6 inches of him can reroll wound rolls of 1. It's not a huge damage buff, but it still can affect a lot of models considering the size of Mortarion's base. So now that we've determined that Mortarion's pronouns are absolute unit, how do we defeat him? How do we send him back to the warp from whence he came? Well, fortunately, the answer is very straightforward. Just need really big guns. It might sound really obvious and basic, but bear with me a moment. Unlike Magnus, who's another Demon Primarch, who you often need to just grenade to death until he goes to sleep, that's not really an option against Mortarion because he has that Feel No Pain. A few grenades might help here and there, but it's not going to be quite as clear cut. And Magnus can be really tricky to deal with because of how many sort of blanks he can do and rerolls and CP rerolls and all that kind of stuff. Whereas Mortarion, it's kind of just, he's got his stats and maybe there'll be one CP reroll in there, but you just need to just bulldoze your way through that stat line. And the weapons you want to be focusing on are ones that have a good volume of fire combined with a high strength and a decent AP. And fortunately for us commanders of the Emperor's true finest, he has given us the perfect weapon for this job, the Demolisher Cannon. You see, the Demolisher has volume. It's D6 plus 3 shots. It's also got strength. Strength 14 means that it's going to wound Mortarion on 3s, and there's a big difference going from a 4-up to wound to a 3-up to wound. It's also got the AP, so that even if Mortarion's in cover, it's going to kick him down to that 4+ invulnerable save. The only problem with the Demolisher is its damage is very swingy. You might get all that way and then roll a bunch of 1s and 2s on your damage, but this is the guard. Don't bring 1 Demolisher Cannon, bring 3 of them. Remember the golden rule. If you bring 1 unit, 1 is none. You bring 3 because 1 is going to mess up, 1's going to die, and 1 is going to get the job done. Some of you might be thinking, what about things like the Vanquisher Cannon? The problem with the Vanquisher is just that one shot. It has got strength, it has got the AP, and in many ways it's got the damage advantage over the Demolisher as well, because it's always going to be doing that solid amount of damage with that d6 plus 6. But the problem is just the one shot. You could get the hit, you could get the wound, but then Mortarion could just get that 4 up off, and he could do that 3 times in a turn with a CP reroll if your opponent gets lucky. So Vanquishers are okay. I still think the Vanquisher is one of the best guns and the best tanks in the guard. I didn't used to think that, but after running them a lot, I really do love them now. But I think the Demolisher is the slightly better option. Another great way of dealing with Mortarion is lethal hits. Lethals just allow you to get past that T12 without even looking at it. Even on weapons like plasma cannons and multi-melters, which normally would need 5s to wound, if you can just get those 6s when you're hitting, it just makes things a lot easier. Taking all of this into account, my go-to unit for dealing with Mortarion is Leman Russes with Demolisher Cannons. Whether that is Leman Russ Demolishers themselves, or you go for Leman Russ Tank Commanders. But one way or another, you're going to want Leman Russes that can get up to hitting on 3s, they're going to have lethal hits, and they're going to have enough boom boom to just break down that stat line chunk by bloody chunk. But I also want to throw out a couple of honorable mentions. Don't overlook the Leman Russ Executioner. Sure, it doesn't have the strength advantage of the Leman Russ Demolisher, but it does have the volume of fire, it does have the AP, and it does have flat damage, making it a little bit more reliable when you finally do get those wounds through on Mortarion. And it still benefits from lethal hits. An Executioner with the Plasma Turret, the Plasma Sponsons, and the Las Cannon, and a 100 killer missile should generate enough volume and enough lethals to be a genuine threat to Mortarion, and it can do it at a safer range than the Demolisher Cannon. Because the problem with Demolisher is, if it messes up, if they all mess up, God forbid, but if they all mess up, you'll be very close to that front line and you might start struggling a little bit. So keep an eye on the Executioner. You might want to include 1 or 2 of those as well. And the other honorable mention goes to the Rogal Dawn, because especially with that Oppressor Cannon, that's strength 12, that's AP -2. You've got the strength where at least you're wounding him on 4s, and you've got the AP where maybe with a bit of Fields of Fire or some ignore cover, you can get him down to that 4% vulnerable save, and you've got the flat damage 3 as well. Also, the Rogal Dawn has so many guns in it that it can just naturally generate loads of lethals, and that can be especially important when you're talking about that Pulverizer Cannon, which is strength 9, but it's AP 3 and it's damage 3 as well. The best bit about the Rogal Dawn is it's a good long-range fire support unit, but if you need to get it up close, as we said, Mortarion can physically struggle to get through it. So it is, if in doubt, an emergency roadblock. But that's enough on Mortarion. Let's head over to the hot topic in the Garden of Nurgle, the Deathshroud Terminators. Like with Mortarion, let's look at that stat line first so we know what we're up against. Deathshroud are very slow with only movement 4, but don't forget they can rapid ingress, so they'll probably get to you sooner rather than later. They're a mighty T6, which does mean that a lot of weapons that normally wound Terminators on 4s are going to wound them on 5s. And then they've got a 2-up save, 3 wounds, and of course a 4+ invulnerable save because they're Terminators. A lot of people look at Deathshroud and just see them as tanks, but don't underestimate their damage output. In melee, they naturally hit on 2s, and each model can get up to 4 strength 8 AP -2 damage 2 attacks, and they have lethal hits, so not even tough things are safe from them. And especially from an Imperial Guard perspective, their range damage is not to be overlooked, because essentially they get a whole bunch of anti-infantry 4+ Nurgly hand flamer kind of things. But it's not the Deathshroud on their own which are the problem. It's the character that you add to the unit. You see, when Deathshroud are being led by a character, they get -1 to wound when a weapon's strength is higher than their toughness. So if you were hitting them with some kind of plasma gun or melter gun, your typical anti-Terminator weapons, rather than wounding them on a reliable 3, you're then wounding them on an ever-swingy 4+. Combine this with the aforementioned toughness 6, and you have to start getting up to proper anti-tank weapons like las cannons and demolisher cannons before you go to wounding them on a 4+. And even then, they're going to get wounded on a 3+ at worst. This makes them really, really horribly durable. And in my experience, the go-to character for the Deathshroud is the Death Guard Sorcerer in Terminator armor. This is because he is the cheapest Terminator character that can join the unit, coming in at a very, very cheap 70 points. 70 points is really good. A lot of the Death Guard characters are cheap, but that's really cheap. And not only does he allow them to start being -1 to wound against a lot of attacks, but also he can add a lot of ranged output via a combination of his Curse of the Leper focused Witchfire with his Pestilent Familiar ability. And how we are seeing these Deathshroud being used is as a relentless wall of pressure against their opponents. The Deathshroud aren't going to get to you turn 1, they're probably not going to get to you turn 2, though they might do. But turn 3, they're probably going to have marched and advanced across the board to start getting to you. And they're also going to be on those middle objectives. They're going to be pressuring no man's land. So the big thing is that they're kind of just sitting on the objectives, squatting on them, and just tanking all of the damage. And if you try and shift them off with shooting, well, as we've seen, they're very resilient to that. They've also got things like Cloud of Fly stratagem that could be used. And if you try and get them in combat, well, that's where they excel, with those big scythes of death. So how, in the God Emperor's name, do we deal with these guys? Well, normally against Terminators, my advice would be to use a Basilisk. Because Terminators are very slow, the Basilisk can reduce their movement by -2, reduce their advance by -2, and reduce their charge by -2. That would have Deathshroud walking around at 2 inches a turn, which is comically slow. But unfortunately, that's not going to work all of the time. It's a potential for maybe an isolated Deathshroud unit putting pressure on a flank, but it's not going to work near Mortarion. Remember I mentioned that ability where he ignores all modifiers? He allows units around him to ignore modifiers? Yeah, this is why I said it was a big deal. Because if you have Mortarion near Deathshroud, then if you hit the Deathshroud with the Basilisk, they don't care. They're still going to be moving their full distance, and they're still going to be advancing their full distance as well. So we are going to need something else. And fortunately, we do have the perfect anti-Deathshroud unit. I have used this multiple times, and I was blown away, even more blown away than the Deathshroud were, by how lethal and efficient this unit was. I'm talking about the Scion Gigablob. This is where you take a 10-man Scion squad and give it every plasma and melter gun you can. Don't forget the plasma pistol on the sergeant. And then you take a 5-man Scion command squad, join it to the unit, and guess what? You take every plasma gun and melter gun you can in that thing as well. And again, don't forget the plasma pistol on the officer. You might want to take a grenade launcher as one of the 3rd special weapons, and it's up to you whether you want to go for a 4th special weapon, although at that point you're down to like hotshot volley guns, and I think you're better off taking the banner more than anything else. But let's not get distracted by lovely bits of flapping cloth. Let's focus on the damage. The reason Scions are so good in this configuration at killing Deathshroud is because they get lethal hits against infantry. And Deathshroud Terminators are definitely infantry. They might feel like they're tanks, but they're definitely infantry. You also get sustained hits because the squad is being led by a Tempestus commander. And the Scions get reroll 1s to hit, or they get full rerolls to hit if the enemy is on an objective. And guess what? Those Deathshroud are going to want to be an objective. The whole thing is pushing onto them relentlessly. So turn 2, turn 3, when they get to the objectives, that's time for you to strike. Deep strike those Scions down and start blasting away. When you come in, make sure you use the order first rank fire, second rank fire, because that will give you an extra shot on every single one of those plasma guns. And bear in mind, you're going to have 3 of them in a unit. It means that you'll be getting 9 plasma shots from the plasma guns, then you'll have 2 plasma pistols. That is 11 plasma shots with full rerolls to hit, with lethal hits, with sustained hits. And we've not even got to the 3 melter guns, and don't underestimate those hotshot las guns as well. They are getting lethal hits, and they do have inbuilt AP -1, taking those Deathshroud down from a 2-up to a 3-up. Of course, unless they're in cover, but you do have ways of ignoring cover or boosting the AP to still make sure that you're getting some kind of pip of AP damage onto those Deathshroud. In this configuration, your Scions will reliably clear out a Deathshroud unit, and that's not talking from any math hammer or statistics. That's coming from cold, hard-earned battlefield experience in competitive games. In fact, both myself and my Death Guard opponents were shocked and appalled at how quickly the Deathshroud went down when the Scions came to town. However, don't forget the enemy does have Overwatch, and those Deathshroud are going to have a lot of those plaguey wrist flamers if you get too close to them. My advice is try and bait out the Overwatch, or hit multiple Deathshroud units at once so they can't afford to Overwatch everywhere. You've also got the fact that the Death Guard opponent, I should say, will probably be saving those CP for other things that he wants to do. Potentially going for Cloud of Flies if you're going after Mortarion, because he's only got so many CP, guys. So the best thing is to try and bait out the Overwatch, hit him across multiple fronts, and don't forget that if you do deep strike down a unit of Scions and then he overwatches them and kills them, if you've got 2 CP, you can use reinforcements and then drop your unit down again. Yes, it's probably going to be sans the command squad, but you can still essentially get a big hit against those Deathshroud, and 10 Scions are still going to tear a huge chunk out of a Deathshroud unit and probably even clear away the majority of a smaller 3-man squad. So now that you know what Deathshroud do and you know how to counter them, the last big question is, how many are you likely to face in any given game? In my experience, the minimum you're going to come across these days in any competitive matchup is 12. 2 big squads led by a Deathshroud Terminator, although some people like to have 1 Deathshroud Terminator Sorcerer and 1 Lord of Contagion, because they're pretty tasty as well and they're only 10 points more. But you very well may encounter as many as 15, an extra 3-man squad still led by a character of some kind. I've spoken to a few very competitive Death Guard players, and they have said that they think the full 18 Deathshroud is slightly too much. You have to lose some tools out of your list, you have to lose some capabilities. It's taking the skew slightly too far in one direction. So generally between 12 and 15, either way, it's a hell of a lot. And so you are going to need to have, I'd say, at least one of these Sound Gigablobs in your own army if you want to be able to deal with them. In fact, because of how prevalent Deathshroud have become in my competitive guard armies, I've finally, after God knows how many months, moved away from my quintessential double Basilisk build. And now I take a Basilisk and I always have 1 Scion Gigablob in there. But there's a real chance I'll be moving to double Scion Gigablob, guys, because they're very effective and they allow me to go into Deathshroud and many other targets very effectively. Now, we have focused a lot on these 2 units, Deathshroud and Mortarion, but it's worth remembering that there are going to be other things that the Death Guard are going to have access to. I've seen lots of the plague drones, or the bloat drones, I'm going to call them, flying around, and you've also got those ever-present little nurgling squads for doing infiltration and anti-scout move duty. Can't overlook that Poxwalkers with Typhus are a big deal as well, and you're still likely to encounter some Plague Marines here and there, and they're still a very powerful unit. That's the thing to remember. Just because this new Deathshroud Mortarion Death Guard meta is upon us, doesn't mean that the old stuff that was causing us headaches has gone away. No. Death Guard have just got more stuff that has got better. That's going to give them more tools in the toolbox, and that is going to make them deadlier than ever to face off against. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. What has been your experience taking on the Chosen of Nurgle over the last few weeks, and what tactics and tips have you found to be effective at countering them? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to go ahead and smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.